Afternoon, Dennis.
Hi, apologies for being a bit late. Only a little bit late. Ooh. I'm frantically trying to find where we are on this. Is anybody better than I am at being up to date?
So the last one we had was the challenges for structural something from the 13th of November. I think no, hang on, no, it must be the one above that. Yeah, the challenge UQ estimation from the 11th, I think was the last.
11th of January.
Yeah, that was the one that Glenn put together. So then Glenn, myself, Daniela and Paul and a few other people met up 2 weeks ago or about 10 days ago to discuss this. And we sort of split up section 3 and 4 because we were all sort of going to be working on those. So I think Daniela, Daniela and her team agreed to do 7.3 and Glenn and I agreed to do 7.4. And I just uploaded my first attempt at 7.4 to the Dropbox about 5 minutes ago.
I can see that. That's helpful. So I wonder if Daniela and or Paul are likely to join us.
Yeah, I think we said we were going to keep in touch by Slack, but I've only worked on this in the last 40 minutes, so we haven't really communicated much.
Is this is looking at it rather quickly, scanning it. It's as much related to the modeling challenges as to estimation. Is that right?
Which section are you looking at? there's a
The
specific piece.
document you just uploaded.
So this was, yeah, so I think this challenge specifically that Glenn had highlighted, so there was 5 challenges that Glenn had highlighted. Principles of uncertainty quantification that I think Peter, Ian and some others were going to look at. Then there was data challenges, which Daniela and Paul were going to look at. The section that I looked at was challenges of estimation, which Glenn split into modeling, estimation and prediction, and then model comparison and combination. So it's more the estimation, the problems or complexities of estimating parameters within models rather than necessarily constructing the mathematical mechanistic models, which is what the modeling paper is more looking at, I think.
Right.
And then the 5th point was the expert elicitation and communication.
Yes, and sorry, I'm juggling between these two rather ineffectively. Who was right? So, and the only contributor at the moment on 5 is Phil. Is that right?
I'm sorry, 5 being
Making
I'm
sense.
I'm also juggling. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
With the mo while I get the other document up as well.
So that was the challenges for expert elicitation and communication.
Yes. I won't call myself a contributor. I'm the only person with my initials down.
Well, exactly so.
Yes. I've tried hard to, I've tried to get Will Probert involved, and although he's keen, he doesn't have the time. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm very much an interested outsider in this area.
Yes, I'm sorry, we haven't responded to your email.
No, there was no response required.
Well, there was a bit, but my only action following your email was actually about wondering if you were willing to be a ringmaster, which I think you sort of suggested. Who were the components in the ring that you might whip into?
Well, I've got a list. I mean,
yeah.
My next action point is to prod them into action.
I mean, the people that were speakers in the session that you organised.
Yes, they're the prime suspects, definitely. And there's some. Also, there's some very good documents one can mine.
Good.
Yeah, there's the inkling of a shape.
Excellent.
Yes.
So do we need to do any more? I mean, is there any more we can do to help other than to sort of provide lots of encouragement in your ringmasterly activities?
I'll let you know if there is. Because
I mean, the only thing I could think of was to go back and look at who'd been involved in the past, and you've obviously already know that.
No, I will get on with that when a moment presents itself.
That's great. So, and then Peter, do you know what's happening about the second of these sections that Glenn?
Okay, nothing's happening because I haven't made it happen.
Right. Okay.
Today, I will get hold of Michael and Ian, probably by writing a straw man and sending it to them, and then they can tear it apart.
I think it's proving really. I mean, we were having a similar discussion this morning about the data paper. It's proving really everybody is just so busy.
Yeah. And I think everyone wants to do it. It's just finding the time.
Exactly. And I think
priorities.
The way probably for anybody who has got a little bit of capacity in terms of time is to write something.
Yeah.
you know, so that one's giving them something that they can look at. Because I think there are a lot of people who are, in principle, very willing to be involved, but just, you know, it's just too difficult. They can't find the time to be free when we're meeting, or to sort of sit down and write something. But looking at something that somebody else has written, you know, stimulates thoughts.
Yeah, if I can find the time to write some sort of framework and put some words in it, and maybe even just allocate writing tasks, they will do it. So I will contact them.
That's super.
Because I mean, Michael certainly was keen the other week.
Yeah.
Ian, I know, is keen, but he's got children.
Yes. Children and lecturing responsibilities, and the two don't leave much time for other things.
Some of it's lecturing the children these days, isn't it? So.
Hi everybody. I'm sorry I missed last week's meeting. I put it in my diary on the wrong day.
But we did swap it, which might have confused matters.
Yeah, I figured it out by now. But what I wanted to ask is this document online, is that now open for suggestions, or what is the status of that document? I hear something being said about writing assignments for specific people. I'm not sure what I can contribute at this point.
Well, you would be very, very welcome to contribute anywhere that you think you would like to contribute. So I don't know. I mean, are you looking at this document that Glenn?
I'm looking at a document that ends with the initials GS.
No. Well, if you look at the document that's called Challenge 7 UQ Estimation and EE 6th of January, ending with GM.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a sort of outline that Glenn suggested, a structure.
Yeah, and I've seen that before.
Yes, you know, that's been around a while. So that's really what we were just talking about in terms of people contributing to different sections of that. And the one that ends BS is a draft by Ben. I think of number 4, isn't it, Ben?
Oh, that is a specific section.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got bullet points in that. The challenge UQ estimation is kind of the bullet points of the main challenges, and then the next stage is to kind of bulk that out a bit by turning it into slightly more wordy prose. So what I've done is just the first attempt at that, but it's still very basic and needs more work.
I thought I had missed so much that the whole document had been distilled to those 2 pages.
No.
Oh, I'm so lost.
Rather the opposite, that so little has been done. Yeah. So really, I think, I can't remember, I guess it was the meeting that you missed, probably, where we sort of attached some initials to things.
Yeah.
But they would just suggest, well, volunteers and a bit of arm twisting, I think, or maybe a lot of arm twisting. So wherever you feel you best fit, and as many as you're interested in would be great, Luke.
I could probably, I see there's only one initial, Philip's initials, with behind the making sense of complexity. Yeah. I'm happy to contribute there. We as a
your happiness has been noted. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah.
I think your happiness has increased Phil's happiness.
No, I'm in a department of public health, so it's really our field to interact with experts and policymakers. So to make sense of it all and elicit opinions.
Yeah, oh, super.
No, that would be excellent, right? So we can add some more.
I will.
Some more initials to that one.
I'm going to do that right away.
So to an extent, what we were trying to do, because this is a big group, well, in principle, it's a big group, although it's seldom more than about this size on any particular week, was having allocated these volunteers, in inverted commas, that people would go away and have sort of subgroup meetings and try and flesh some of these out a bit. And that was what I think Ben was referring to when he said some of them had a sort of sub meeting to try and work on some of this. So there's hopefully a bit of work going on in between with writing and communicating by email or whatever.
And in what form would you like these groups to deliver a product like Ben did?
Yeah, I think the idea would be that if these subgroups could provide, I mean, whatever they can really, but to take one of these sections and provide some paragraphs.
Okay.
And then these can gradually be, brought together, and one can start to try and, other people can comment on them, and we can put them all together and try and see how they fit and what's missing. I mean, there is the issue of trying to write in a common style, but perhaps that's one for the future.
I think my process has been taking the bullet points and then trying to write a paragraph on each bullet point, and then gradually trying to get, remove the bullet points one by one until we just get a page of writing.
Yeah. I think that sounds good. I mean, there was this issue of how the challenges, what the challenges were, how they appeared, whether there were section headings or sort of identified within the sections. And I think it's hard to know until you start writing which way works best. But I think you just have to start writing and hope that something seems to make sense as you do it.
Create some material.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial bit. Have you actually done any sort of formal expert elicitation?
No, not in a quantitative sense, but the microsimulation models that we developed over the, well, not I personally, but that our group developed over the past decennia, we always try to involve policymakers and program managers from tropical countries for which we do this work to make sure that the models make sense. So in a qualitative sense, we elicit expert opinions.
Did you have any formal framework for this kind of interaction, or was it just on an ad hoc basis?
It's probably ad hoc, but recently we did publish a paper on like core principles of model development and communication for tropical neglected diseases, at least, which was published in PLOS NTDs, I think. So I think we can at least take some inspiration from that.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to put the reference for that in the chat or something?
Yeah, I'll look it up and put it in the chat now. Yep.
Thank you.
There's also, I've been reading a document which is actually very useful indeed on from the Food Standards Agency on doing things, looking for problems about safety of food and foodborne diseases and things, and they have a very well organized and described system for expert elicitation, which I think we could camp on to a large extent.
Mm-hmm. So again, I mean, is it, I don't know what people find more helpful. Is it better to put these things in the chat, in the Slack channel, or in the Dropbox, or all three?
Well, the chat tends to disappear if you're not careful.
Yeah. Maybe it's good to put them in the document on Dropbox.
I think in the Dropbox, in the relevant section. Yeah, that's probably quite useful. Yeah.
The only thing is I haven't figured out yet to access the document other than through the website. So I'll have to download it later. So if for this time somebody else can put it there who has access right now,
Are you signed up to Dropbox?
Yes, I do have access, but via the web interface, I can't like type in the documents.
I can't upload the doc. Oh, you can't change the document, you mean?
No, I have to download it, change the name, and upload it again.
Oh, what a pain.
Did you? Yeah. If you're properly signed up to Dropbox, it should be possible to have the folder so it looks like, you know, your own files on your own computer.
Yeah, I don't have that set up yet, but I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, certainly that I guess that's the way we're all using the Dropbox. So obviously, if you could
I'll comply.
do that, would make just make life much easier, because otherwise it's obviously quite tricky for you to do these things.
I'll do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How do I do that?
So has anybody been in touch? Well, I suppose it would have to be Ben, probably. Have you heard anything from Danny and Paul lately?
No, the only thing TJ posted in the Slack a few minutes ago said, well, 5 past, saying he was going to be a few minutes late, so he might be joining shortly.
Oh, okay. Oh, I hadn't seen that. Well, that would be good if he did.
But I don't know, Glenn, have you heard anything from?
Oh yeah.
Well, they did actually. So there was some discussion about whether we were supposed to meet on Monday, and we hadn't actually arranged it, but they did suggest that we would meet today, didn't they? I think.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, they emailed to apologise for not turning up to the meeting that we hadn't organised on.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a better way of putting it.
Okay, and TJ, as you say, certainly says that was 6 minutes past 5. He was going to be a few minutes late, so hopefully he might appear fairly soon, which will be useful.
I can chase, Glenn and I can chase up with Danny and Paul and see where they're up to. Now that I've got it, I've added a document, then.
Yeah, thanks for starting that, Ben.
That's all right. It's still
I haven't had a
early
chance
days,
to do
but
anything this week.
yeah, no, I understand.
Well, I wonder what we can usefully do now, while we wait for them to see if they're going to appear. Would it be useful for Ben to take us through what he's just written?
Yeah, I think that it's useful.
Well, obviously we haven't written it. Sorry, we haven't read it, or at least less people have been very quick off the ground. So this, are you saying this is half of section 4 or the whole of it?
No, it's the whole of it. So I think
Right.
originally 6.3 and 6.4 ended up with pretty much all the same names attached to them. So in our separate meeting, we decided that Glenn and I would focus on 6.4
Yeah.
and Danny and her group would focus on 6.3, and then we'd kind of communicate and review each other's and contribute.
Yeah, it was just that in Glenn's original structure, there are sort of 2 bullet points to section 4, aren't there? One that's modelling, estimation and prediction.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Ben,
so that's still there.
Yeah.
And then if you go down to the bottom of the main document, there's a list of sub bullet points within each of those 2.
Oh yeah, I found it. It's all right.
Sections.
I found the comparison and combination a bit further on. Yeah. Okay.
And with the comparison and combination section, there was 4 bullet points that I felt were quite similar. So I've sort of written a single paragraph that aims to address all of those.
Okay.
They're mostly about
I'm with
model
you.
averaging and combination.
So
it's
is
not
your-
a fact.
Is your thinking that the bullet points, I mean, the bullet points are where it's come from. where your
Yeah.
paragraphs have come from, but are you thinking that we'll be able to cut out the bullet points and just?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, I think I can probably go through and add a bit more detail to some of it, but once I've done that and made sure, I think with the modeling paper, I had an issue that if you remove the bullet points, then it wasn't quite as clear what the paragraphs were referring to. Because when I was writing them, I had the bullet points directly above. But yeah, that was sort of the next stage, was hopefully to go through and remove those. But maybe it'd be useful for reviewing purposes to have those remain in for at least a bit longer.
Can I ask a question that isn't directly relevant to this, but I'm just looking at page 2 and seeing your reference to Ronnie Bowman's work. Something else I was trying to write this week, I wanted a good reference. All I've on model combination, and all I've got at the moment of her stuff is is an archive paper that's quite old now. Do you know, is there anything more recent than that? Does anybody know?
I don't know. I think that was that you, Glenn, who originally wrote those bullet points? And
You'd hope that would come out by now, but
I don't think I wrote that one.
okay.
Oh, sounds like Peter might know.
no, I don't. I was talking to her the other day about something else, but she didn't mention it. I can drop her a line.
Oh, I just wondered. I wanted to, you know, I thought it might have appeared somewhere by now, but
Yeah,
I didn't.
should have done. So.
I didn't find it. But if there is a more recent reference, that would be good.
Yeah, I can ask her.
Thank you.
I talk to her relatively often.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I could always email her, but yeah. Ah, TJ.
Hello everyone, sorry I'm late.
Welcome. Good to
Another
see you.
meeting for ban. How is everybody? Everyone's looking frazzled.
I think if all you are is frazzled, you're doing quite well at the moment.
So are you in a position to update us, TJ, on what might be happening with section 3, I think it is?
No, I'm sorry.
Right.
The last 2 weeks have been insane.
Okay.
And
So you haven't been involved in updating any of this?
Yeah, no, I haven't looked at it yet, but my plan was to
fine.
do that this week, and then other things have cropped up and I've not been able to. Next week is looking a bit better, so I'm going to try and put some time aside. I'm really sorry.
No, don't
worry.
apologise.
Yes, I didn't get back to you, TJ, this week because intention was that I thought I'd have a go at section 6.4, which Ben actually has now done a bit of. But I thought once me and Ben maybe got that to some semblance of something sort of coherent, we might talk to you about it, because that's about, you know, the technicalities of doing estimation and model comparison, things like that, which I thought maybe that might be an area you would want to contribute to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm happy to get involved, and I'm trying to contribute in places. I'm just barely holding it together at the moment.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had your initials are on both 3 and 4, and I gather that Danny and Paul are sort of had promised to do something on 3, and somehow I thought that you were in touch with them on that, but possibly I was.
I haven't been so far.
No, that's absolutely fine.
I can be. So just trying to find what's the latest version. This is on the Dropbox, the IDP.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's chapter 7.
So you've got, is this the 7.4?
So that's the extended section that I just uploaded this afternoon, and then there's the challenge 7 UQ estimation, which is the overarching structure document that I took that out of.
So I mean that one might be worth having a look at, just to see where you might want to sort of direct your efforts when you've got some time. Your initials have been splattered all over it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do all those sections. It was more that
possibly with question marks, but possibly not.
Yeah,
that's right. Is there a particular section that that you prefer me to contribute to, or?
Well, I was thinking it seems quite, from what I know of your work anyway, it seems like 6.4 seems quite a natural one, but I think Danny also thought that maybe the uncertainty quantification one was one you could get involved with.
Yeah, I can probably do a little bit on both of those, if it's helpful. Cool.
I'm sorry I'm joining so late, everyone. You've given me lots of jobs, I presume.
No. We could have done with you this morning. We nearly gave you some jobs this morning, Jasmine.
You should have. I'm sorry. At the moment, with my new post at the JBC, it's kind of all over the place with the meeting. So I'm sorry.
Don't worry. I'm not getting at you. But we felt we needed somebody with all your sort of data, experience in that meeting.
I will join next time. Did that progress?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So just tell me what to look at and I'll be quiet and look at it.
We were looking at two things, or at least I'm looking at two things. I think that's the same as everybody. The one which is the document that's been around for a while, challenge 7 UQ estimation, etc., with Glenn's initials at the end, which sort of gave the overall structure. And then there's a new section 7.4 in a separate document with today's date on and Ben's initials at the end.
Okay, I've got them. I'm listening.
Yeah, and we were just discussing sort of progress on the other sections, and I think TJ has nobly agreed to help with 2 and 4, I think. So Peter has another volunteer for, or at least the question mark comes off the the initials on section 2. And
I think
Luke had volunteered to help Phil with section 5, which was very useful.
so. That's quite good, because I was going to say probably 3 and 4 is where I'll be most useful. Probably the sort of 3 of the modeling
well,
of a changing pandemic.
That's where your initials have been put.
Okay, the JP.
I think I'm assuming you.
Yeah,
must
sorry,
JP.
that was me.
That's fine.
I realized afterwards that wasn't quite right, but
that's okay. No worries. But it's fine.
So I think, yeah. Anyway.
So, I mean, in terms of, so what is the current plan to just sort of try and then knock each of these sections into, just to get some sort of basic structure and then pull it all together and try and do some editing later on?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the idea being that the different groups can sort of like work independently and it's not all sort of.
I suppose it makes sense if each section can be expanded upon by one group, then it can sort of go round the houses and people can then contribute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did we put stuff that we were going to put here from the modeling paper, or are we doing that as we progress with the sections?
I guess some of the bullet points have kind of come out of discussions from the modeling paper, but I don't think we've copied across any specific text at this stage, as far as I know. Is there something specific you were?
There was
about?
something I thought there was like a paragraph that we said to go in the estimation, but I'm going to check.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, wasn't that in the data?
Yes. Yeah, it was in the
6.3
data, but we decided that maybe estimation was better.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I could. Well, yeah, I'm happy. For you
Okay,
to
so we
look at
need
that
to
or
just
I can,
put
but-
that, and I think that would fit in probably 3 here.
Yeah. So I think Danny and Paul were taking a lead on 7.3, so it might be worth passing it on to them or putting it in a separate document or something.
I've been trying to speak to Danny about something else as well. I thought she'll be here so that I can hassle her here, but she's not. No.
No, we're hoping, but she hasn't materialized as yet.
Because I was hoping she'll be also, that I can ask her something else independent that been trying to ask her. And Paul's not here neither, no?
No.
I haven't actually looked who is here. Okay, I'm now looking. Hi, everybody.
Sorry, it's I'm going mad here. So there's on the challenge 7 UQ estimation page, there's 5 challenges, but then we've also got 7.4. Is there a whole section 6 missing?
Isn't that meant to go in section 4 of the challenge 7?
Yeah, so that 7.4 is the separate, is the.
Oh, I see.
pulling
Sorry.
out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting confused. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
So I've essentially taken all those bullet points out of that section and just tried to write a paragraph on each bullet point.
Is the plan to raise questions now, or to just agree on this and then go away and sort of think through it? Because I'm only asking because, for example, I'm reading 7.4, challenges of model validation. I think maybe an aspect here around real time fast versus slower, a bit something that we talked in the modeling paper, or do we not repeat it here?
Well, I think we should try and put it here if we think it's relevant here, and then we can take a judgment as to whether it's more suitable in one or the other.
And the concept of prediction versus scenario that Jan P was talking there as well.
There's already some discussion of that in terms of estimation versus prediction.
But is estimation the right thing? Or scenario analysis would be because estimation is around estimating point estimate.
So yeah, so by
versus...
estimation, I was meaning more kind of descriptive models rather than predictive models. But yeah, I guess the kind of more forward simulation from mechanistic models is another.
I mean, maybe that's more appropriate in the modeling
paper, yeah.
I guess there probably will have to have some work done to this to try and tie it in with all of the other papers as well, because of course the problem is they're not standalone concepts.
No,
right? You fit a model.
Oh, that's Danny's and Valerie's job, guys. Sorry to be direct.
Put your initials against that.
I think there'll be lots of cross-referencing, but I don't think there's any harm in having things in both places as long as there's something different to say. I mean, if it's, we don't want straight duplication, so that's probably a brief reference and a brief mention and a cross-reference. But if we're looking at the same point with something slightly different to say, from a different perspective, then I think it's useful to have in both places. Because I mean, all these things are so intertwined that we can't really sensibly carve them up.
I mean, I guess the key
without any overlaps.
Yeah, and one of the key points is, kind of like, often actually these models are being used for prediction, and so we want the uncertainty in the estimation process to be propagated through to the predictions.
Yes.
In some sense, so that there's a natural link there.
Yeah.
We're not purely using these for inference, if you like. It's kind of, it seems to me that a lot of the modeling is being used for prediction, and for scenario planning, like Jasmina said.
Mm.
So yeah, I think there's a sort of link there which would be nice, and then that could just link through to the modelling paper.
I also maybe Peter will disagree, but I also think that some of these issues that Jan P was raising about, you know, the nature of prediction versus scenarios and so on might be something that the uncertainty quantification section at the top kind of actually deals with anyway. So we might just have to refer back to it. I don't know if that's true.
I think it depends how deeply we go into that.
Yeah.
I know Michael would like to go very deeply into that, but
yeah. but at the very least, we might have a sort of you know, brief sentence that says this is known about, and there are sort of
I think we will
stuff here that we could refer to.
I think we will link to something about decision making and why uncertainty quantification is really important if you're going to use these models to make decisions, and that will link to the policy paper.
Yeah.
I mean, if Michael felt like writing a sort of companion paper, he would, of course.
Well, I think
he really wanted to explore it at great length.
He did, and we might put it as an appendix, because I think if you're not careful, it breaks the flow, and people stop reading at that point because it gets difficult. And we might throw that into an appendix, but I think if I could persuade him to write it, it would be great.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he seemed keen.
Oh, he's definitely keen.
Can I just ask also about sort of, we don't have to go into depth now, but the on part 2, are we covering both different methods, the like, you know, the wheel stuff and the Ian stuff, or are we doing just UQ, or you know, I don't know, I've missed a couple of these meetings, so maybe that was decided before.
I think because Peter's the one to try and answer, but if
I think we need to do the UQ stuff. I also think we need to do what people actually do, which isn't the same. So, you know, the challenge of estimation of what people do at the moment, which probably isn't going to sit in that UQ bit because we probably don't approve of it, but it's what people do.
Yeah, and I think to some extent that's what 6.4, at least in my mind, is about. So it's trying to make the link between, you know, the UQ section and what people do, and maybe where we would like to get to and what the technical challenges might be of doing that.
Yeah, I think there is, you know, how we get to where we'd like to be from where we are. And that's a non-trivial problem.
Yeah.
Because people aren't just going to abandon what they do and do something different. That's utopian.
So I mean, I think, you know, going back to what TJ was saying earlier, that, you know, if we write these sections as we currently see them, when we come to put the whole thing together, we'll probably have to work quite hard to make the bridge between them so that the whole thing joins up. But I think that in itself will be quite useful.
What do you say people do right now then? Just kind of I do stuff, but you tell me what you.
So a lot of people just do ABC.
Yeah.
And they do ABC on the data, but they don't include the uncertainty on the parameters. So they're fitting the stochasticity on some of the parameters, but they don't fit all of them. So there's some uncertainty not accounted for, which is why I think that when you look at the model error bars, they don't cover each other because they're not broad enough. And that's uncertainty that hasn't been included in the calculations.
And what do you think they do this because it will be much more time consuming and hassle to do it, or do you think it's because they don't understand how it perturbates through the system?
I suspect it's they don't have time to, they haven't had time to learn the more modern ways to do it that would include all that uncertainty because everyone's been working so hard. So it's no one's fault. I think it's just people have done what they've always done, and what they've always done ignored some of that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right,
No, I
Jill.
completely agree. I just wanted someone else to say it.
Okay.
Because I do ABC when I want to do something quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not a bad thing to do. But if you're not careful, you ignore some of the uncertainty. You have to be very careful.
Yeah.
But ABC in some sense does incorporate some of that model discrepancy through the fact that you're not matching your data exactly and you're using summary measures. So they're like, it's sort of a halfway house. It doesn't quite do it in exactly the same way as you would do it in sort of the history matching framework, but it's also not, there's more uncertainty in ABC than there is in kind of more traditional
Conservative.
sort of Bayesian estimation approaches. So, and I also think, you know, we need to be a little bit careful because there are lots more approaches than just ABC. So some people are using ABC, but some people are not. Some people are using kind of pseudo likelihood type approaches. Some people are using fully data augmented, you know, kind of Bayesian MCMC type approaches. Some people are using particle MCMC. Like there's all sorts of kind of different approaches that people are using for different models. And of course, you know, like challenge with something like ABC is if you want to fit to detailed data, it's very difficult to do that because you are limited by how many summary statistics you can feasibly use. So again, you know, if you want to fit to kind of quite detailed data, it might be more beneficial to go down the route of doing some sort of MCMC type approach. Although, as you say, Peter, you know, the kind of model discrepancy idea is not something that we would routinely build into things like MCMC or particle MCMC or those sorts of things. Although, you know, that could be that would be an interesting kind of thing to look at with those sorts of methods.
So I agree, TJ. I mean, I kind of think that kind of thing is the challenge. One of the challenges we want to try and sort of crystallize in this paper, at least in sort of general terms. Like, how do you do that? I mean, I don't know, basically.
And I would just say that maybe what TJ just described in a table format with what has been done, what needs to be done, what are if it has faults or not, could be a table in this paper.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a sort of a table with sort of pros and cons of different approaches, and
yeah, or our understanding of these. We don't have to be flying the flag for this or that. We just our understanding based on what is out there and how do we think we can overcome it.
I mean, I also think just generally, I mean, it's not just because people are rushing, it's because there are actually some real computational issues that haven't been solved yet. I mean, you know, even particle MCMC, I mean, we initially at the start of this thought that was going to solve all our problems, but actually we realized very quickly that the more data you've got, the harder it is to use that, and it becomes infeasible at the moment.
Yeah,
we just didn't have a big enough computer. So
yeah, I think that's a big point. You know, in an ideal world, there would be code that everyone could use for all these different approaches, and we could compare them and such like. Yeah. But that code doesn't exist, so everyone has to write their own, which again is a big block.
Yeah.
Big thing to point at.
Sorry?
It's a big thing to point at, the lack of.
Yes.
And for not that much money, we could probably get professionally written code.
Well, I think that there's another point there, right? So there are packages that do things like particle MCMC. I think the problem is, like Glenn was saying, is that, you know, when you start scaling these things up to and you have very kind of specific structures in your data that you're trying to match to, then those kind of general purpose packages, you tend to want to optimize your code to fit that specific model, because otherwise I guess it's all really a question of scale here. So most of the sort of standard software is kind of, I mean, there is a lack of standard software for fitting infectious disease models, but there are packages out there, but they I think for the sorts of scales that people are talking about here, you really need to have good, you know, customized code. And I mean, if you want to start doing stuff like I guess Glenn has been doing with the data augmented MCMC and Chris Jewell and people like that, you know, those sorts of approaches really need bespoke code. Like there's, you know, I find it very difficult to envisage kind of, you know, really good, scalable, off-the-shelf software for doing that, because I think there's so many nuances that will depend on each individual problem. But that in and of itself is a challenge, right? So how do you, is it possible to generate generic software to do a lot of this stuff, or is there always going to be elements where people are going to have to, you know, customize their own code?
I think that's where Stan has tried to come in and have an algorithm which is sort of something that works relatively well in the broadest scope of possible model situations, but even they have issues with certain parameter types and certain models. And I think there is some work in there now on infectious disease models, but it's still relatively basic. And it's why things like, you know, we have Nimble and Jags and Bugs and all these different softwares that try and be, you know, the catch-all software, but they all have their drawbacks and their issues, which is why I spend so much of my time writing my own MCMC samplers. It's just,
I don't have to be deterministic.
it's just so specific to the task you're looking at and the type of proposal distribution that you want and the type of tuning. And there's all these asymptotic theoretical results on optimum acceptance rates. But when you have complex posterior distributions, then it's just never going to quite work asymptotically as you would like it to.
But I think the main problem for infectious disease models is much more to do with the missing data, right? Because you never observe infections. That's always the thing that you have to estimate somehow.
Yeah.
So it goes from being a relatively simple model to one which has, you know, potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of unobserved variables. And then if you want to allow the number of unobserved variables to vary, then that becomes, you know, so like all of those things are really hard things for like Stan wouldn't cope with any of that stuff, and especially not when you can't draw, you know, you're proposing your hidden states from non-standard distributions often as well. You know, because if you're proposing new infection times, you need to make sure those new infection times are consistent with all the removals that have happened and all of the, you know, everything has to be sort of checked and double checked, and that it gets all sorts of horrible. So I guess there's a, you know, software, I guess, like Pyros that people were trying to push early on in the outbreak, but those sorts of, you know, they're general purpose, but they also introduce approximations. I mean, it's effectively fitting a sort of an approximate version of the model that you'd actually like to fit. So again, when you sort of, the general purpose software have to come with a lot of concessions.
Yeah.
And I guess this is ABC's problem as well, right? ABC is attractive because it's easy to implement, but there's so many sort of subjective choices that, you know, you can get quite different inference if you use slightly different summary measures and so on. And I guess those sorts of problems will also feed through, Peter, to the UQ stuff, right? Because your inference is only going to be as good as the things you're trying to match to. And you're almost never trying to match to millions of data points. You're trying to match to summary measures of some description. So actually those kind of issues are also important.
Absolutely.
In terms of the simulation-based methods.
You know, the problem we've got on, well, with Danny, DJ, you know, because we don't have the data we'd like, which is the number of cases. We have these sort of other bits of data that you try and work back into the number of cases from number of people in hospital or number of people dying, which we sort of have a handle on. But the number of cases, we have no idea, even now.
Yeah.
Well, you got these on the news today was the infection rates estimated from the ONS study. I mean, are they useful to you?
Well, everything I think is useful. But those don't, again, tell you, you know, how many people in the country, or even there are some estimates of the number of people in the country who have it, but they're very uncertain.
Yeah.
So the main state variables in your model, you actually don't have any information on.
I mean, so in my sort of language, that's about how you sort of construct observation models to bridge the gap between those. I don't know if that chimes with.
Yeah, so with MetaWards, I don't know if this is true because I've not been out in TGM, like, correct me, but certainly initially, we could fit two types of models. Ones which had a lot of infection and very few people going to hospital, and one where not that much infection and everyone went to hospital.
Yeah.
And that gave us bimodal distributions that were really horrible to fit. And it was really hard to distinguish between those two possible scenarios.
But I think that, in some ways, I think that probably early on in an outbreak, that for a new disease, that is what the situation you're in, because there's so much you don't know. It could be either scenario, and often it's more in the middle.
But this is where I think it kind of links through to the idea we were talking about right at the beginning of, because this is where the prior elicitation stuff is potentially hugely useful.
Yeah.
At the beginning of an outbreak, when we don't really know very much about the parameters, but you might want to constrain the parameter space to be something which is, we always want it to kind of be informed as best as possible by the knowledge that we have. But I guess we're kind of, probably all of us on this call are wanting to work towards a system where we're probably not fixing parameters. We're probably allowing parameters to have some distribution associated.
Yeah.
But that's actually still quite a hard thing to do well. And,
and also I don't really know how to do it, but somehow what we'd want is for a new pandemic is to extract the information that's in the outbreak in the most efficient way possible, so that you get to the point where you understand the parameters and you can move away from these prior elicitation kind of things. Because in reality, the people that you're talking to, that you're eliciting that information, they don't know either, really. And so what you kind of want to do is have a system which kind of extracts the information from the epidemic at the fastest rate possible. And so it's the things that we would want to do, in my view anyway. What this paper should be about is how the blocks on us doing that, and some of them are covered outside this paper in terms of like what data is available and what have you, but I think in this paper it should be about, I would quite like to cover things like using models to actually identify what data could be collected or should be collected to narrow the uncertainty as quickly as possible. So for me at least, and going back to what Peter was saying, it would have been really nice to have had sort of randomized testing at some level across the country, which I think we could have afforded to do, and would probably have been quite useful. Well, would definitely have been useful for modeling. The case, I guess, is whether we can demonstrate that would also be useful for policy ultimately. But obviously, that didn't really happen. I mean, I know there is a sort of randomized prevalence survey, isn't there? But
yeah, no, I agree with that, definitely. Knowing what you need to collect in order to answer the questions is a key sort of challenge. And just following on, Glenn, from that, like I think it sounds, to my mind, kind of a main thread that would thread all the way through all of these estimation approaches is the computational complexity of this, right? So we just don't have, unless we're prepared to fit deterministic models with least squares, we don't have, like, the moment you move into these either simulation or latent, big latent variable data augmentation type approaches, computationally it just gets
and that, in my mind, that is a big challenge to solve, but there are lots of others as well, around this, the sort of framework that you're doing all this in as well is not entirely clear to me.
And difficulty for Bayesian perspective is priors as well, and particularly at the start of a new pathogen or a new virus. So I did write a paragraph on this and added an extra bullet point that you're at the worst possible position at the start of a pandemic, that you're in a data sparse environment because you haven't got any data yet, but also the knowledge for informing priors and elicitation is very low as well. And you risk, if you try and start using what you think are similar diseases or similar viruses to try and inform your priors, like using influenza as an example for COVID, you really risk then introducing biases into your modeling. But if you don't have some form of informative prior, then you might as well just not fit your models because you haven't got any data to constrain anything either. So I think that's a major challenge. And whether there's any solution to that, I don't know, but other than using least squares.
There is accessibility prior elicitation as well. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm not familiar with prior elicitation, despite having worked in data. I'm not familiar with prior elicitation, despite having worked in data.
There are formal frameworks to do it, like Delphi studies, which are very. Ooh, there's a lot of reverb. There's a lot of reverb. So Delphi studies are a very structured way to elicit and review opinions and expert opinions and quantify them, but they take a huge amount of time. So for a rapid pandemic response, that might not be the best way. So I think there's also a balance that we could discuss in the paper of working with like a small set of chosen experts versus like a bigger Delphi study, and at what points in what situations either approach is useful.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think that also links on to Glenn's point, right, is that at some point you want the data to start taking over, right? Because you're sort of, as you learn, like particularly in a new outbreak, your initial kind of ideas are helpful at the outset, but you want it to be superseded in some sense by the data as we go through. So as long as you have a method that enables that transition. But yeah, no, I think with the prior elicitation stuff, I think so much of it is just that it's not taught routinely. You know, you sort of do Bayesian stats, but the kind of, you know, I think a lot of people will still kind of, I don't know, I sort of still feel, and I don't know whether this is, you know, it's probably not the right way, but I still feel slightly worried about using informative priors when I do Bayesian modeling. Because it's kind of been hammered into us that you don't want to be informative because that's being subjective and but actually maybe, you know, there's some sort of barrier there that needs to be broken down where we because again, it's just the whole kind of ethos of how you construct them and how not to be overly informative, but to have enough information. And I know the STAN group are doing a lot of this with trying to push forward sort of weekly informative priors for a lot of things, but that the prior sort of specification is the thing I think that puts a lot of people off Bayesian statistics. I mean, I have a lot of conversations with people and they're just like, well, I don't want to choose my prior. I don't want, you know, as if it in some sense taints the outcome. And so I think there's definitely a kind of communication or a sort of background issue there to how do we overcome that? How do we give people advice to generate sensible informative priors?
I would actually
hold up under scrutiny.
I would argue that priors actually provide a means to understand your model behavior through prior predictive checks. They're actually helpful to understand your model before you start throwing data at it and treat it as a black box. So
how many people actually do prior predictive checks? That's the
well, I started doing that since a few years, and it's more work than I would like it to be, but it's so useful.
Yeah, I would completely agree, but I don't know many people that would use that as part of their standard kind of Bayesian toolbox workflow.
I think the challenge again in a pandemic is you have to turn this stuff around quickly.
So quickly, yeah.
We still haven't started calibrating MetaWards, and we, you know, because it's just taken so long to get everything up and running with it. So, you know, it's yeah. But I mean, but this is perfect fodder for challenges, right? This is all stuff that, again, like coming back to software and things, like if we had as a community had a better kind of understanding of all the utility of all of these things and how they're implemented in practice and what have you, then maybe we could start thinking about using this stuff more regularly. Because I don't know anyone who does prior predictive checks either.
Well, you do now.
I do now, yeah. But it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I do it occasionally, but not as frequently as I probably should.
I mean, I guess there's also a case to be made, you know, maybe there needs to be more investment in sort of preparedness. So, yeah. I mean, obviously people are working on diseases, but it tends to be, you know, relatively short-term funding and not sort of thinking, okay, what what things might come at us and sort of running, maybe sort of even the idea of wargaming might be something that could be considered in terms of how you would respond. Perhaps that isn't really this paper, but what is this paper, I think, is thinking about the estimation challenges that different types of disease might throw at you. So, you could imagine sort of virologists and so on coming up, thinking about what they know about different diseases and sort of, imagining what the next SARS, the next kind of equivalent, the next pandemic might be, and then thinking what the estimation challenges that went with that would be. I mean, you're always going to be surprised, I guess, but you might more likely have closer tools if you've done that kind of thing.
I think related to that is we need to at some point weave through a message around vaccination and or interventions in general, and the challenges that we are talking about of the technical validating the model become a layer more complicated when you then put in the uncertainty around interventions. And I don't know if you've seen the paper today that came out and said that we're never going to reach herd immunity with the vaccines because you need to vaccinate this much, etc. But that's based on a huge number of assumptions of some fixed parameters and some distribution parameters, and it's not quantified the uncertainty in their predictions in that way. So I think this needs to be weaved through, or maybe I don't think it's a separate point, but it needs interventions as well as within the validation needs to be put in somewhere.
So I mean, it sounds to me like we're sort of beginning to coalesce lots of ideas, and so I guess, does it make sense?
Someone needs to put them on paper.
Well, yeah, that's
or on
what, yeah, I was
computer.
going to say. Does it make sense if we sort of maybe try and? I mean, I know Ben and Glenn have been doing some stuff already. I need to pull my weight a bit. Sorry, but. Because I wonder whether quite a lot of these things might be useful to revisit once people have got, a brain dump of their sections down, and then we can maybe begin to bring in and sort of work out where everything ties together. Because I think quite a lot of these points that we're talking about actually sort of flow through the paper in some kind of sense. So we might be able to link everything up.
I think the way Ben did it with a bulletin, picking up the bulletin points and expanding on them is a good way to do for now. And then I think our next discussion will be around are the right bulletin points having been expanded in the right place, or do they overlap with each other? So I mean, I don't know. I don't know how busy even I'm going to be in the next week, but is it feasible that we would have a expanded bulletin point list by next meeting?
Yeah, I think so. But then I thought that for this week as well.
I'll try to block out time next Thursday on my diary so that I'm not getting.
And maybe a useful thing is if you are going to block time on Thursday, maybe, I don't know how early is early for you, but first thing we could have a chat. Say, for example, on section 6.3, or you want to draft stuff and then we talk whichever way you want to do. So I'm kind of focusing on 6.3. TJ, what do you want?
Well,
I think
my current feeling is 6.3 is perfect Danny fodder. And
I
Paul,
see.
I think they're kind of like they probably are the best people to lead.
But they are actually working on that now.
What's that? Sorry?
They are working on that.
Oh, they are, okay.
Oh, they are, okay.
So
do we know if people are editing this document, or are people downloading it, doing stuff on their own machines, and then we're then going to merge it all together at the end? Just because you don't want to write loads of stuff to then find that somebody else has already written the same stuff in a different document.
Yeah, so that's what I mean, Dennis maybe can give us advice how to do this.
I think at this stage, it's probably best to have separate things like 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. We've got 7.4 draft, haven't we? And then, and because I think there's going to be so much going on if we edit a combined draft, we maybe get confused. But I think if you do separate drafts of each section, as I say, call them 7.1, 7.2, etc. And the people who should be making changes to a particular section should only be the people whose initials appear after it. And so, if you want to check who else, but also if you make it, I suppose you can do sort of track changes, but if you make a significant amount of change, you should save it as a new version. So put your initials and the date at the end. What we find when that's being active over the week is you end up with a document the following Thursday that's got several lots of initials and a latest date, and you can, then when you're together, you can sort of say, if we're happy with that, let's just clean it up and agree that the draft is okay as it is.
So I think TJ.
Oh, sorry, carry on, Glenn.
No, I was just going to say, I think me, you, and Ben, I think can work on this 7.4 document over the week as we get time, and then Jasmina, I think you should contact Danny and Paul to see where they've got to. But my half suspicion is they might not have started yet. But
the big advantage of doing it in Dropbox, where everyone can access everything, is that you can see how other people are getting on. So you might potentially browse a different section and send them an email saying, "Hey guys, you've written a paragraph that I think belongs in my section," or I would like to make a suggestion for your section.
Yeah.
So it's. I think we've been doing it extensively on Challenge 6, and it's seemed to be productive rather than too confusing.
Yeah, we need to brain dump first before we can sort out the overlap.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that, I think.
I mean, that was the idea of sort of breaking into these kind of, well, I guess there's really only 3 sections, but was that there are distinct groups who can then actually do that. So as Ben started.
I mean, maybe the thing to do then is if within our sort of groups of people on each of these points, we maybe just communicate amongst ourselves for the next week or so and try and get a draft of each of those sections together, which can then be shared more widely. Because then at least I suppose it focuses us, or it focuses.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I will contact them and take it from there.
Great, thanks, Jasmine.
Okay, are we heading off?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, yes. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Remember that there are recordings of these discussions, so when you do your brain dump, if you need to remind yourself.
Remember what?
Yeah, that's true.
You should be able to find them on the YouTube thing, and the YouTube link is on the bulletin. I mean, I think it takes a day or 2 for them to get put on, but they will be there. So if you're trying desperately to remember what somebody said, that might be an extra resource.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm off to cook dinner. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.